Thank you. Do you hear me well with this one? Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Sigrun Rawet, and I'm the Deputy Director at Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, which is an international institute based here in Stockholm, doing a lot of research on peace and conflict. But now I actually want us to go back 2.5 years ago to a very beautiful but little cold autumn morning in New York. We knew that we were going to enter the council in January the year after, and we sat in one of the conference rooms at work thinking, what could be the priorities for the Security Council? And as you can imagine, there were many different priorities that could be very important. But quite quickly we realized that we wanted to have something where Sweden has a comparative advantage and where we hoped that we could make a difference. And we realized that we want to go for conflict prevention, actually focusing more on before the conflicts than always being there acting after. We realized that it would be difficult. It's a very sensitive issue within the Security Council. But we also saw that we had a new Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who came in with a very strong mandate that he wanted to focus on conflict prevention. And when we had this as a priority, being big humanitarian donors, having worked with humanitarian issues for decades as Sweden, it came very natural to us that we have to look into conflict and hunger. So that was kind of the start. I think then this is January now 2017, where we just entered our 2-year tenure in the council. We had, as I'm sure all of you remember, the big call for action for the 4 famines. It was Yemen, Somalia, Northeast Nigeria, and which was the 4th one? Now let me... South Sudan, of course, where we got quite shocked when we realized that there were 20 million people out there that suddenly were facing the threat of hunger. And I think this also gave us a push within the council to get some more of the other member states with us. So why is it important with a link between conflict and hunger? And I'm sure many of you know much more about this than I, but where we came from, it is clear that the trend with conflicts have actually reversed. We now have increasing conflicts in the world. We also, since 3 years, have an increase in hunger. And this is obviously very linked. Most of the people that suffer the most, 60%, they live in conflict-affected areas. That's also where you have 2/3 of the stunted children. And it is clear that this really strikes at the core of humanity. You have the children, you have teenagers, mainly girls, you have pregnant women that are at the biggest risk. And we had, this was not a new issue. We had loads of meetings, we had worked with the humanitarian sector, we also did a presidential statement, but we just felt like now when we have these years, let's actually see if we could do a resolution. And a resolution is not a binding agreement, but it's the highest moral agreement that the Security Council can agree upon. And we said that how can we do this? Number one, we needed coalitions. So it was us together with Netherlands that were very much pushing this agenda too, together with Kuwait and also the Ivory Coast. And I think that is in general a lesson not only in the Security Council but also in life, that you need to have a broad network, and preferably with countries that are not as us. So we would have many different arguments, backgrounds that would be able to help us while doing this. We also realized that this will not be easy, because you will have countries like Sweden that come into the Security Council, and we say that we have a very broad definition of security. We believe that gender issues, climate issues, water issues are actually part of security. But you will have quite a lot of countries that will say, this is development, this has nothing to do with security. We do not want to mix in those more developmental aspects within the Security Council. So already there we have 2 parts. You will obviously also have, we had wonderful colleagues, for example, from Ethiopia that also felt a little bit, we have a history of hunger in our country. Will this be used against us? What is this? Why do you want to bring this to the Security Council? So that was one. You will obviously also have countries that are involved in some way in the conflicts in Yemen and Syria that are not very pleased of having some strong new resolutions on this. So it was kind of quite a difficult mix that we had there. But we also said that we have to work so closely with the humanitarian sector. We worked with World Food Programme, FAO, ICRC and OCHA because we absolutely did not want to do anything that would be counterproductive for them. So that was always our aim, that if that would be the case, then rather not have a resolution. So and I think that comes very natural to us because we have such a long-standing relations with many of those organizations and know each other well. And I also think that they actually trusted us, that Sweden, since they know that we also stand up a lot for the humanitarian principles, that they weren't too scared that we would just go away and do something strange within the Security Council. So that was also, and then we also said this has to be unanimously adopted, because if we have a resolution where you'll have loads of countries saying that we do not agree with this, then it's actually better not having a resolution, because then we will undermine. And we started in January last year, and it actually took us 5 months to negotiate this resolution, and that is quite a long time, because it was not easy. It was not. It was sensitive in many ways. But in the end, we had the resolution, which actually was adopted then on my birthday, which I thought was quite a good gift in May that year. But what is then? Is there anything new with this resolution? I think for many of you, you will probably say that, I mean, conflict and hunger, how difficult can it be? I'm sure there are loads of resolutions already, but there actually isn't. So that was number one. This was one of the first time that the Security Council recognized the link between conflict and hunger, and that it actually had something to do with international peace and security. That was one thing. It was also a fact that the Security Council said that using hunger as a weapon of war may actually be a crime against humanity, which was a second thing. Something else which we were very much focusing on is that we also have a conflict prevention and an early warning aspect of this. The Secretary General is tasked that he has to come to the Council and brief the members when things happen on the ground when it comes to hunger issues. So it was a stronger mandate for the humanitarian system to really come and knock on the door and say something is happening. Because one would not think that, but it's actually quite a lot of fighting over who comes to brief us. That was something we had to fight over a lot, getting in the humanitarians, getting in the women's group. It's not at all straightforward who has the right to come and brief. So that was also something. We also, in the resolution, have the link between conflict and hunger, the sanctions part, the early warning. We also have quite some strong language on humanitarian access and humanitarian principles, however, not really going further than other things we've done, but it was also in there. Then we also had the part where we said that the Security Council has a toolkit. One is the sanctions part, but the other one is also that we can ask peacekeeping operations to actually facilitate humanitarian access. We're not saying that peacekeeping operations should start distributing food, but they can facilitate the access. That was something. And we also had quite some language about that this is part of conflict prevention and also gender dimensions and so on. So I would say that those were the things that were the most positive. And also very recently after we had done this, OCHA came back with what is called white notes, where both on Yemen and South Sudan, that they briefed the council with, which was very important. We also gave the Secretary General the task to once a year brief the council on the implementation of this resolution, and that will happen now for the first time in May. In May, when we have the Protection of Civilians Week, and also so we'll see there. But then, of course, the question is, what did we not get? And I would say that number one, we got in language that conflict will lead to more hunger, but we did not get in language about that hunger actually can induce conflict. That was far too sensitive, and I think that will be the next step for somebody else to take forward. We wanted it to be like a separate agenda point on the council, conflict and hunger every year. That was not accepted, mainly by the permanent members, because they said we already have so many agenda points, we don't want to have loads of different agenda points. So the compromise was that the report will now be under the protection of civilian agenda point in May. We would also, yeah, I would say that those were the two biggest one that we kind of didn't get in. And then, yeah, like that. Yes, and another very important point was that when we started, we actually wanted the UN to have the mandate to look at this as a conflict prevention in all settings, also in countries that are not in conflict. But that was far too sensitive. We had to, in order to be able to have the resolution, it had to be in conflict settings that we can look at this. And this is not only for this resolution. This actually happens quite often because many countries are very scared of the UN, the Security Council, broadening the mandate too much to countries that are not in open armed conflict. And now, so what will happen now? Because, I mean, obviously now Sweden is no longer at the Security Council, but we have had a lot of talks with the new members. Both Belgium and Germany are very much wanting to push this, but also other countries. I think it's also important to follow up a lot with the humanitarian system, that they use this force, that they can push it, that they can do all these fantastic briefings that they do. There is also a group of friends in New York that meets with all the member states, not only with the Security Council member states, and so on. So I think there are many possibilities to continue with this and do something even more. I also wanted to say lastly, because I think my time is running out, Madeline, I'm looking at you here, is that now since September I'm on leave of absence from the MFA and I'm the Deputy Director at SIPRI, as I said, and I want to highlight that SIPRI has a fantastic knowledge partnership with World Food Programme, so I'm glad to have colleagues here in the room from World Food Programme, where the World Food Programme has asked us to look more into the complex relationship between conflict and hunger from a research view, and to look into hopefully positive effects that their work has in different conflict affected areas, but also possible negative side effects. We have just started this work. We have 4 pilot studies that are just being undertaken in Afghanistan, Mali, Colombia, and Kyrgyzstan. So it will be very interesting when we have the first results. It will also be a way for World Food Programme to implement and design the projects, maybe in a little different way, depending on what kind of evidence that we see. And personally, I mean, when we see living in a world with, as Annika mentioned, with conflicts, with migration, with an incredible increase of the humanitarian assistance, really making sure that the assistance that we do have is designed in the best way to help the people that are the most vulnerable, that we are supposed to contribute to. I think that is extremely important. So we're very happy to have this cooperation with World Food Programme and others. So thank you.